You got a letter in the mail today. It wasn't from a bank. It wasn't from the government. It was from your neighbor, technically a committee of your neighbors, and it said your grass was 0.3 inches too tall. They measured it with a ruler, and now you owe them $150. This is not a joke. This happens every single day across America, and the organization behind it has more power over your home than almost any government agency you'll ever deal with. They can fine you. They can lien your house. In some states, they can foreclose on you over a flower pot on your porch, over a basketball hoop in your driveway, over the wrong shade of beige on your front door. They're called Homeowners Associations, HOAs, and before you dismiss this as a story about Karen with a clipboard, I want you to understand something. This is actually a story about power, about who has it, who abuses it, and why millions of people willingly sign away their rights the moment they buy a home, often without even knowing it. Let's talk about what an HOA actually is, because most people have no idea. An HOA is a private organization that governs a residential community. When you buy a home inside an HOA, you automatically become a member. You didn't vote to join. You didn't sign a petition. The moment the sale closes, you are bound by a set of rules called the CC&RS, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. These rules run with the land. They were written, in many cases, before you were born, and they can be extraordinarily detailed. We're talking rules that dictate what color your shutters can be, what kind of car you can park in your own driveway, whether you can have a vegetable garden visible from the street, how many pets you can own, what time you have to take your trash bins back inside. In some communities, there are rules about holiday decorations, how early you can put them up, how late you can leave them out, and even what types of lights are permitted. There are HOAs that ban children from playing in front yards, HOAs that prohibit clotheslines, HOAs that tell you exactly which tree species you're allowed to plant in your own backyard. And here's the thing, none of these rules require your consent. You agreed to all of them the moment you signed the deed. Now let's talk about enforcement, because this is where things get genuinely dark. HOA boards have the authority to levy fines against homeowners who violate the rules. These fines can compound. A $50 fine can become $500 in a matter of weeks if it goes unaddressed. And if the fines go unpaid long enough, the HOA can place a lien on your property. A lien means that if you try to sell your house or refinance your mortgage, you can't do it until that debt is cleared. In some states, an HOA can actually initiate foreclosure proceedings on a home, meaning they can take your house over an unpaid debt that started as a violation about grass height. This is not hypothetical, it has happened. There is a documented case from Texas where a man lost his home over an HOA debt of less than $800. His house was sold at auction. He got almost nothing, all because of a series of fines that escalated while he was dealing with a medical crisis and couldn't respond in time. And here's what makes this even more troubling. HOA boards are not made up of professional administrators or trained legal officials. They are your neighbors, ordinary people, many of whom have no background in law, finance, or conflict resolution, who are given extraordinary power over other people's property and lives. Some of them are fine. Some of them are genuinely trying to maintain community standards and protect property values. But some of them are not. There is a psychology to this that's worth understanding. When ordinary people are given authority, real, enforceable authority, over other people, something can shift. Studies on power dynamics consistently show that even small amounts of authority can change behavior. People who feel overlooked in their professional or personal lives can find in an HOA board a rare place where their decisions matter, where they have leverage, where they can make someone else comply. For a certain type of person, that is intoxicating. And so you end up with cases like the woman in Florida who was fined repeatedly because her wheelchair ramp was deemed aesthetically incompatible with the community's appearance standards. Or the veteran in Colorado who was told to remove an American flag from his property because flagpoles weren't permitted under the CC&RS. Or the family in Arizona who received violation notices for their children's chalk drawings on their own driveway. These aren't stories from some dystopian novel. These are real enforcement actions taken by real boards against real people living in their own homes. So how did we get here? How did HOAs become this powerful? The history is actually fascinating, and it goes back further than most people realize. HOAs in their modern form began to proliferate in the 1960s and 70s when suburban development was exploding and developers needed a mechanism to maintain the appearance and character of new communities. The pitch was simple. If everyone follows the same rules, everyone's property values stay high. It made a certain logical sense, and for a long time, it worked reasonably well. But there's a darker chapter in that history. Early deed restrictions, the ancestors of modern CC and RS, were explicitly used to enforce racial segregation. Racially restrictive covenants barred people of certain races from buying or living in particular neighborhoods. These were legal and widely used until the Supreme Court ruled them unenforceable in 1948. And while racially explicit language disappeared after that ruling, many housing scholars argue that HOAs and their rules continued to function as tools of exclusion, just through different mechanisms. Strict aesthetic standards, high dues, and selective enforcement all have the potential to create barriers that disproportionately affect certain communities. This isn't ancient history. It's the foundation on which the modern HOA system was built. By the 1980s and 90s, HOAs had become standard in new residential construction. Developers loved them, not because they cared deeply about community standards, but because HOAs allowed them to build at higher densities, shift maintenance responsibilities away from municipalities, and market lifestyle amenities, the pools, the clubhouses, the manicured common areas, as selling points. When you bought in an HOA community, you were buying a promise of a certain kind of life. And buyers accepted this trade. They accepted it because the alternative, buying in an older neighborhood without an HOA, where your neighbor could paint their house purple and there was nothing you could do about it, seemed less appealing. People wanted order. They wanted predictability. They wanted someone to make sure the neighborhood stayed nice. What they didn't fully understand was what they were giving up to get it. Because here's something that doesn't get discussed enough. When you live in an HOA, you are living in a private government. That's not an exaggeration, it's a legal and political reality. The HOA has the power to tax you through mandatory dues. It has the power to regulate your behavior on your own property. It has enforcement mechanisms that can result in the loss of your home. And unlike an actual government, it is not subject to constitutional protections in the same way. The First Amendment doesn't necessarily protect you from HOA rules about political signs. Due process protections that would apply in a government context may not apply when your HOA decides to fine you without a proper hearing. You have fewer rights inside your HOA than you have as a citizen of your city or state, and most people don't know this when they buy. Now I want to be fair here because this is a complicated picture. Not all HOAs are adversarial. Many function exactly as intended. The board members volunteer their time. The rules are enforced reasonably and consistently. Property values genuinely benefit. Homeowners feel like they have a voice in their community. For millions of people, living in an HOA is a positive experience and they wouldn't trade it. The problem isn't the concept. The problem is the gap between what the concept promises and what it can become when the wrong people gain control or when the wrong rules are applied without judgment or compassion. And that gap can be enormous. There are HOA management companies, professional firms that handle the day-to-day administration of HOAs that have faced serious legal scrutiny for predatory practices, inflated fines, improper lien filings, charging excessive attorney fees to homeowners who dare to dispute a violation. In some documented cases, management companies have been found to create violations as a revenue stream. They fine homeowners not because a rule was genuinely broken, but because fine income funds the operation. Think about that. The organization responsible for maintaining your community has a financial incentive to find you in violation of its rules. And homeowners often have very limited recourse. Fighting an HOA is expensive, it requires attorneys, it takes time, And many homeowners, when faced with a $150 fine, do the rational calculation: it costs less to pay than to fight. So they pay. The behavior is reinforced. The system continues. There have been some legislative efforts to rein in HOA power. Several states have passed laws requiring HOAs to provide hearing processes before fines are imposed, capping the amount of fees that can be charged, restricting the ability to foreclose over small debts, and mandating greater financial transparency. Florida, Texas, and California have all passed significant HOA reform legislation in recent years, driven largely by homeowner advocacy and some genuinely harrowing stories that made their way into the news. But reform is slow, patchy, and incomplete. HOA industry lobbying groups are well-funded and politically connected, and in many states, homeowners still have very limited legal protection against HOA overreach. So what do you do if you're living in one of these situations right now? What are your actual options? First, know your documents. If you live in an HOA, get a copy of your CC and RS, your bylaws, and your rules and regulations. Read them. Understand what you actually agreed to. Many homeowners have never read these documents. That ignorance is costly. Second, attend board meetings. HOA boards are required to hold regular meetings, and in most states, these meetings must be open to homeowners. Showing up, even just observing, changes the dynamic. Boards that know they're being watched tend to behave more carefully. Third, run for the board. The single most effective way to change an HOA is from the inside. If your community has a problematic board, organize, talk to your neighbors, get enough votes, and change the composition of the board. It is entirely possible, and it has worked in many communities. Fourth, document everything. If you're in a dispute with your HOA, keep records of every communication, every fine notice, every letter. If it came verbally, follow up in writing. Create a paper trail. This matters enormously if the situation escalates. And fifth, know when to get legal help. If your HOA is acting in bad faith, retaliating against you, imposing fines that aren't authorized by the rules, violating your state's HOA statutes, an attorney who specializes in HOA law can be a powerful advocate. Many offer free consultations. But here's the bigger picture I want to leave you with. The HOA that measured grass with a ruler is funny. It's absurd. It's the kind of story you share at a dinner party. But underneath, the absurdity is something that deserves serious attention. We have created, in America, a system of private governance that covers more than 74 million people, roughly 1 in 4 Americans. That system operates with significant power and minimal accountability. It touches the most intimate domain of people's lives, their homes, their families, their sense of security and belonging. And we have largely failed to build the oversight mechanisms that would protect people from its worst abuses. The man who lost his house over $800, the veteran told to take down his flag, the family fined for chalk drawings on a driveway. These aren't edge cases. They are what happens when power exists without sufficient checks, when systems designed for one purpose are captured by people using them for another, when the gap between the promise and the reality goes unexamined for long enough. The grass being 0.3 inches too tall isn't really the story. The story is who decided to measure it, why they decided to measure it, and what they were willing to do with the result. That's worth thinking about.